Well, thanks so much for joining us. This is the State of Jefferson County Business Update. It's our first sort of virtual town hall session. My name is Julie Alver. I'm the marketing manager for Thrive Economic Development. We're the economic development organization for Jefferson and Dodge counties. And our panelists today will provide an update on the local impact of COVID-19, as well as an economic outlook for county operations. They'll also provide a few outcomes and projections and an update on some resources available to businesses that are impacted by the COVID-19 public health crisis. A few logistics. I think you all entered this meeting on mute, and we'll probably keep it that way just to keep it a little quiet so we can hear the panelists. We do have the chat function. If you want to ask a question, we have some time set aside at the end to do a Q&A, and we'll answer as many questions as we can. We are recording this session, and I'll have a link on our website tomorrow. Our website can be found at thriveed.org. Also, for your viewing, this is a large group. I think speaker view is probably your best bet, but you know, whatever makes you happy. Our panelists today, we have Ben Waymeyer. Ben is the Jefferson County Administrator, Vicki Pratt, President of Thrive Economic Development, and Kevin Kaufman, the Director of the Wisconsin Small Business Development Center at UW-Whitewater. So thanks again for joining us. And with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Ben.
Thank you, Julie. I thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation with you all today. As some of you may have heard from Julie, I think we got close to 100 people who are in on this call, which kind of reinforces the concern and the demand of having these community conversations as it relates to the impact of COVID with our operations and the public health concerns, but also how do we look at the recovery as we look ahead to the future. And so hopefully today we can start some of those conversations. I know some of those conversations have been ongoing with Vicki and Kevin specifically in terms of how we look ahead to the future as we look at the back to business programs, the impact that might be having, and trying to get through the various programs the feds and the state are trying to put together and what we might be able to do locally. And so part of my tasking today was asked to kind of give an overview of where we're at with our situation, kind of looking at the impacts of the budget as a whole and how we look to the future of county operations. And then kind of talk about how do we look at this as a community recovery plan, and how do we look together that this is not just going to be a one-person show. It's got to be a community response as we look at reopening and recovering and making our community successful again in the future. And so I had sent Julie a little graphic I kind of like to use that kind of touches through as we look at recovery as she gets it up, but it really talks through the immediate needs and the immediate medical concerns related to COVID. And as it comes up, you'll kind of see that spike, that first wave, that kind of was our response. And I say the response means our medical communities, our first responders, our public health communities, and our communities in general as they stayed home to find a better way to protect each other. But as you start looking in the future for recovery, you start seeing some of these other ways, and we're kind of still at the beginning of that phase. You see a green line, that's a second wave, and the third wave, and that's really looking at some of our medical facilities as they start to reopen to other procedures. And I think you're seeing a lot more of those conversations in the media today, is how do they safely reopen and take care of the folks who had elective procedures or other preventive health items that are chronic concerns to get them back going. But the large curve, which is the fourth wave, that is something I think as we look at recovery, everyone on this line is familiar with. And if you can't read it too well, but it talks about psychic trauma, mental status, economic injury concerns, and burnout. As I talked to our department heads today, we talked about this really being a marathon still as we look to the recovery as a whole. And as I look at that fourth wave, there's a lot of things internally for our county operation we need to look at, but today it's also the crux of why we're here, and that's talking about our business to the future. So where are we at today in some of the current stats? I will tell you, we've had a great community response. We have established a great working team as we look to the immediate needs of the counties and communities' responses. We have established basically a virtual EOC that meets 3 days a week. And on that call, we have our hospitals that are impacted. So that includes Fort Healthcare, Watertown Regional, Aurora Summit, and Oconomowoc Rural Health. We have representatives from all our first responder groups. We have some of our EMS medical directors on that call, various county staff, public health from both the county and Watertown Regional, City of Watertown, and other folks as well. And the initial goal of those meetings was how do we focus on the immediate response and the public health concerns, but now we're moving to that next phase, and it's that recovery phase, and it's the planning for the future. And so some of those key items we're working on as a team is looking at testing. If you look at any metrics in terms of recovery plans, whether it's the current Badger Bounce Back program or things that WMC, MMAC, or other metrics folks are looking at, testing seems to be a key as we look at how do we properly and safely recover responsibly. PPE is another highlight. That's been a big topic among our teams as we look at how do we properly outfit not only our first responders or medical response, but also our long-term care health facilities. We have 142 long-term care facilities in Jefferson County. It's the second most in the state only to Milwaukee County. And so that's a population we work on to take care of collectively and weather those needs, but that means we also need to make sure they're properly taken care of as well. We also have community meetings weekly. We talk with our local municipalities, we talk to our nonprofits and our hospitals. And so I think what I want to express is bringing those forward is that you have a team that has gotten together quickly when this first started to help support, but we're also getting ready to work with everybody as we look at the recovery plan moving ahead. But there's been other groups. I know Vicki has been with the chambers as an example. They work together collectively as responses to the business communities from the chamber level too. And so I think that collective spirit is what's going to help us as we look ahead to the future and look at how we can appropriately respond for the next 12, 18 months and beyond. So the next thing is, where are we at as a county? What cases do we have? And so I'll let Julie turn on the dashboard. We have a dashboard that's updated every day. And it's on our website and Facebook page. You want links. We also link to the City of Watertown's data, as we do not include that in our pages. But as of about an hour ago, we're at 42 confirmed cases in Jefferson County. 26 of those cases have recovered, so greater than 50% of our cases have recovered. We have approaching 1,000 negative tests so far, and of those who have been confirmed, we have 27% that are hospitalized. As I mentioned, we continue to monitor it. If you look at our surrounding counties, I think we're doing quite well when we look at the cases as a whole. And I think Julie's getting a dashboard up there. So that's what it's looked like. And then below, you'll see a link to the City of Watertown so you can get their data as they update it daily as well. And we are continue to be in close contact with them as we work together as a team. As I mentioned before about our facilities, we're also trying to find unique ways to work with our long-term care facilities. So not only is our public health teams and our, like Ford Healthcare as an example, and our Human Services Department, but I also want to give a shout out to the Watertown Health Foundation. One thing we try to look at is how do we support that population, is what are some of those activities? And they support us in developing a Zoom bingo program. And so right now we have over 500 participants in those long-term care facilities playing Zoom bingo. And interaction as we work with them as a whole. So just, again, another example of that community support and collaboration. But there's also the part of we look at the other balance of the recovery, and that becomes the economic impacts and what has it done with our unemployment rates. And as we look at the budgetary impacts to not only our businesses, but also our local governments. Our current estimate statewide is we're roughly at about that, 15 to 17% in the latest stat I've seen of unemployment. For Jefferson County, we roughly had over 3,000 initial unemployment claims made since the Safer at Home order was implemented. There's been some estimates when you look at nationwide and countrywide that some of those unemployment rates could exceed 25 to 27% depending on how the openings occur. And so obviously that's a concern for everybody on this call and our communities as we look how do we appropriately recover. For the county, there's definitely those direct implications as we look at the economy. The county does get sales tax dollars, and those are some initial indications of where we're heading. Looking at assuming the stay-at-home order is in place till the end of May, some of the WCA projections, which is the Wisconsin Counties Association, is we're in a neighborhood of 10 to 15% reductions in sales tax. That's not only for Jefferson County, but that's also statewide, which impacts a significant portion of their general purpose revenue streams as they look ahead. Many of our services are tied directly to state revenue. In many ways, we're an extension of state services when we look at our various functionalities that we have to carry out. No, many of these things, such as human services, are greatly impacted right now. Our mental health calls are very much increasing, and crisis calls. Obviously, our work in terms of benefits are also seeing a significant spike as we work to get people in terms of the entitlements from the federal benefits they're entitled to. We also continue to monitor our state and federal budget, what that might look like in the future. How does it impact us? But as we plan for our budget for 2020 to finish out the year and go into 2021, we're also making assumptions we're not going to have the help. And so we're trying to make sure we take care of ourselves and our communities as a whole. We recognize there's probably going to be a budget repair bill at the state level, just knowing where the revenue's in. The Legislative Fiscal Bureau just released numbers today, and their tax collections for April down about $878 million over last year at this time, just for 1 month. So that gives you a projection of where it's at, almost not quite and half of what they collected last year. And so as a result, we're taking some restrictions, just like many of you are in your businesses. We're looking at our priorities. We're looking at purchases. We're looking at capital purchases. We're looking at restrictions on spending. Everything that everyone on this call is prudently doing, not only in their business, but at home as well, and how to prepare for the future. And so we expect we'll have to be working through those situations as we continue on for the next fiscal year and beyond. But really the question is, how come on this call today, you don't want to listen to me talk, is about the recovery and how do we look at it? Right now, there's a report that was released yesterday, and on an annual basis, expected that our GDP for Jefferson County towards the state is about 4.6 billion, roughly give or take. With the current restrictions in place, the impact to our GDP as a county is 2.692 million on a daily basis. So that's a significant reduction, and it goes directly in terms of how do we safely reopen. We realize this is not going to be a light switch as we reopen. We realize that we need to work collectively to responsibly reopen. And our team has worked with some businesses already. How do we safely put precautions in place? How do we appropriately test to ensure there's a quick response so folks can take care of their staff, but also so they can make sure that they can maintain production of their supplies that they're creating. There are options as we look at regional models. There are some folks who are looking at and how does that impact and what is our involvement of that looks to the future? How does it align with the state? Obviously, for many of this call, we're waiting to see what happens with the Supreme Court ruling and how does it impact the current stay-at-home order, and how does it look at any replacement plan that might take place if there's a ruling adverse to the governor's order. As we talk through today, and look at the plans that have been put in place by Vicki and Kevin and how we can work together, we need to look at this as a collective response. Our law enforcement community has talked to many of our businesses and how do they work together. I think many have recognized that we just cannot open in an unsafe manner, and they have been very supportive of what our law enforcement has done, both from the sheriffs and the local municipalities. But we also recognize that folks are looking for a plan, they're looking for answers. And so we did take some immediate actions with the Back to Business program in partnership with the Small Business Development Center at UW-Whitewater, and looking at how we can do the coaching that they'll talk through, but also looking at how we can connect folks to the various federal programs that are in place. But we also recognize many of those programs are set for a defined period. I believe the PPP program I was talked about earlier, that's really defined for an 8-week period. You look at it. If we extend beyond 8 weeks, what does that mean for the future? And so as we develop this more, there's going to be an engagement process that we need to have participation by our business, our economic development professionals, our local communities, our public health, and our health facilities, because we recognize that even as we open, there will be an increase in cases, and that needs to be done in a safe and responsible manner. And so I appreciate the support we have. I hope this does not become the only time we get to have these conversations related to how do we work together to recover as a community. Hopefully in the future, we can have some of the events that we've been talking about in the evenings with this group. But if we need to keep meeting by Zoom for a while to keep the connections going and have a conversations, I think that's better than nothing right now too. And so with that being said, I will turn this over to Vicki to start talking through the actions of where we're at today from an economic development standpoint.
Thank you, Ben, and welcome everyone. I'm glad you're here. As Julie said earlier, for those of you who might not have been on from the beginning, this is being recorded. So you know, if anybody wants to pass it along or listen to what they might have missed, it'll be on our website. So as Ben alluded to in his conversation, we did launch a program that we called Back to Business, and we launched that on April 1st. And of course, we did that in response to everything that we were hearing from our businesses, and frankly wanted to get out there even earlier, but we had a lot of conversations with a lot of people about how to best do this. But Kevin and I kind of talked through this and said, between Thrive Economic Development, Jefferson County Economic Development, and the Small Business Development Centers, we should be able to cover these two counties adequately, and we have. So the goal of the program was just to provide assistance to our businesses, the immediate assistance of these are the programs, these are the resources that may or may not be applicable to your type of business, because as every business on the call knows, there's a million little caveats in every single program that could either qualify you or disqualify you. So it was helping people understand where they fit, how they might access those dollars, in what manner, the types of things they would need to be tracking. But it was also kind of that customized approach to help us help you, not only to be able to weather the storm, but to be prepared for when the economy does reopen, when the stays are lifted. What are the changes you can be making or thinking about making in your business today that will position you differently going forward, and quite honestly, differently for the future. It's an ongoing conversation, certainly in my profession, but we live in the upper Midwest, folks, and we have weather, right? We have tornadoes, we have floods. We now have an unprecedented brand new pandemic, but things do happen. Things do happen that can affect your business. So it's always a good idea to be thinking about what changes can I be making, and what can I learn from this. My favorite line is, never waste a perfectly good crisis, learn something from it. So that was the whole point of launching the Back to Business program. I can tell you, since we launched it, we've had 88 folks contact us and ask us for assistance. The vast majority of the business types are, not surprisingly, forward-facing retail, and then we also broke out professional services, and that runs the gamut. That's the hair salon, the nail salon, the massage therapist, but it's also the accountant, the attorney, the realtors, so people who provide a specific service in your community and have a presence in your community someplace. Roughly, about 48%, close to 50% of those are retail, forward-facing retail, and about 33% are professional services. And the vast majority, interestingly enough, Jefferson County had 28 of those responses, and the rest of them are Dodge County businesses. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're learning and trends and projections. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I do think that we have to be honest about where we are so that we can make good decisions about the types of changes that we may need to institute in order to get forward here. As Ben said, unemployment claims, right? So we've had 1 month time frame, Jefferson County, from week ending March 21st to week ending April 25th, 5,090 new claims. So that's a lot of people that are out of work. So some of the trends, well, certainly we're seeing that businesses who had a stronger digital presence were able to both make sales and collect payment online are faring better than those who didn't. There's been a lot of discussion at the municipality levels across the two counties about things that can be done to help our businesses other than just let's throw cash at them. I think it's important to help our businesses, support our businesses in ways that make them stronger and more viable, given whatever types of issues may arise that would stop them from doing business in their normal ways. So helping them create or enhance their digital presence is a great idea. Automation. Again, we're seeing the businesses that were more heavily automated in their processes are not being hurt as badly as those who weren't. So there's some trends. I mean, we're seeing that locally. That's a national trend. I think it's something we're going to continue to see. I wanted to talk a little bit about retail today and about retail and how it relates to real estate and what we're seeing, but I'm going to start with just some national data. And I think one of those data points that helps put things into perspective, in the United States of America, for a whole bunch of reasons, we have 24.5 square feet of retail space for every man, woman, and child in the United States of America. Now, let me give you a contrast. Europe, all of Europe combined, has 4.5 million, or 4.5 square feet for every man, woman, and child in all of Europe. So what that means is we're vastly overbuilt in retail. Now, what does that mean for our communities? And how will that affect us going forward? The projections right now, 50% of all department stores in America, which this projection came out 10 years ago and was originally set for by 2030, 50% of all department stores in America would be gone. The new national data that came out last week says 2 more years. So what was predicted to happen by 2030 may be happening by 2022. What's that mean for the future of local Main Street retail? Well, I think it's dicey, to be honest. And I think it's a hard conversation, but an important conversation that we all should be having. How do we plan for our community's growth going forward? What types of retail services do we want to see in our downtowns? How do we help our businesses be viable and be competitive and be able to stay there and stabilize our communities? I think these are important conversations to have. The concierge retail model is a national trend that's really taking hold. So that's folks who are sourcing specific items for people in their community and are creating a retail pickup space. So, you know, I said earlier, those department stores are going away, but people still like to go to one place to shop to get a bunch of things. Those concierge services are taking hold. This is becoming a national trend. There's a real impact as we think about our community, because in the state of Wisconsin, most of our municipal governments are completely dependent upon property tax revenue. So loss of retail is going to affect their ability to collect property taxes to deliver services, as Ben alluded to earlier. The need for services doesn't go away in a time like this. As a matter of fact, it gets higher, and in many instances much more acute. So where will those dollars come from? We're seeing some lessons learned that are already affecting retail. Some of you may have seen a report that came out today from Nationwide Insurance. They've realized that the vast majority of their workforce is doing just fine working remotely. So they've got 5 operations centers. That's a lot of real estate that they are closing because they don't need them anymore, because their workers don't need an office and a desk and a phone and a place to be. They can work from home. I put that out there to say we should be thinking about this as we think about how we will build a more resilient community going forward in every one of our communities. So I think financing as well for storefront retail is going to be affected. And I can see that we've got some of our lenders on this call from several different banks. I think this is going to be an issue going forward. And, you know, it may be an opportunity for our municipalities or our counties to have loan funds in place that will support those types of operations at the local level, because I'm not so sure that our traditional lending sources are going to be as supportive of retail as they've been in the past. And, you know, we will see what happens with that. As Ben said earlier, the Badger Institute is throwing some projections out there in terms of what the impact is going to be to the state of Wisconsin, and they broke it down by county. And yeah, we were forecasted for 2020 to have a GDP in Jefferson County of $4.7 billion. But the forecasted loss right now is 9.83 million. What does that mean? It means we're losing $31.83 per person per day in gross domestic product in Jefferson County. So it's a big hit, and it's going to have a multiplier effect. It's going to have a trickle-down effect. It affects businesses, it affects revenue streams for government services. And we need to be thinking about that recovery from a mindset that protects our health, creates that herd immunity. I don't know how many of you have heard that term, but you know, I can remember my own grandmother, when one kid got the measles, you put all the cousins in the same room so that everybody gets the measles at once, and you know, then you're going to survive and life's going to go on. And that's COVID-19. I don't mean to downplay it. It's very nasty and very serious. I personally have an aunt in a nursing home in New York who has been in the hospital with COVID-19. So this is scary stuff. I'm not downplaying it. But as Ben said, as we talk about recovery plans and regional recovery plans, we have to make sure that we're doing things in a way that allow our businesses to get back to business, that allow our residents to safely get back into the world, and that doesn't overwhelm our healthcare system, because our healthcare system is our healthcare system. We can't magically make it bigger. So my colleagues, and lots of other folks are looking at this and having these conversations and pushing for a reopening in a way that makes sense. I personally believe we can't lock down forever. That solves nothing. But we do have to figure this out. So I encourage all of you, if your business or you know other business owners who are still struggling and trying to figure out, what can I do to survive? Are there resources out there? Contact our offices. Kevin's going to be up next, and he will talk more about the day-to-day of what's been going on in the program. But we continue to be there to help our businesses and monitor what's going on and get them the support they need. And people have been getting the checks. They have been getting the deposits. I've heard from many businesses who have successfully gotten that assistance from the different programs. So with that, I'll wrap up, and please send your questions in, and we're going to open this up for questions later as well. So send your questions in. We're happy to answer them. Julie?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, well, next we're going to hear from Kevin. He's going to tell us about some of the programs for the SBDC.
Thank you. So I wish I had a magic wand here to say, you know, geez, things are going to be fine. But I think you've heard from our other two folks that you know, these are kind of unprecedented times. The Small Business Development Center centers throughout the country were designated as technical assistance for these programs as they rolled out. The two major programs I'm sure everybody's familiar with is that Payroll Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program that had an advanced function to it. So just some kind of stats within the state. We've touched directly about 3,000 businesses. This office has touched about 225 since the beginning of this, with a lot of help from my great partner Vicki and the Back to Business program. And I think the two programs are really a contrast in how successful they've been so far. I'll start with the good news, and that's the Payroll Protection Program. From April 3rd through the 16th in Wisconsin, there was about 4,300 and 400 loans 43,400 loans that were approved and funded for a total of about 8.3 billion. And then, as you're aware, we ran out of money, and it reopened again on April 27th. And through last Friday, an additional almost 30,000 loans in the state for almost 1.7 billion have been funded. So a grand total of about 73,300 loans, and just shy, and by just shy I mean just about 2 million shy of $10 billion has flowed into Wisconsin businesses under the PPP program. EIDL, not so good. And I'm going to tell you the difference between the two is the payroll protection program. You apply through your bank, and they used an existing setup. They used the existing 7A program and just modified it to be able to get funds out quickly. The economic injury disaster loans, they really started from scratch and started with fits and starts and reapply and websites crashing and et cetera. As of April 24th, the advances, there's been about 14,200 advances, totaling about 63 million. There's been about 339 loans worth about 71 million that's been out the door. There are a huge backlog of, and I don't have visibility to the backlog, but there's a huge backlog of applications that are working their way through, and the SBA will continue to process those and eventually, hopefully, get some money out. As I think that we can make some reasonable assumptions around Jefferson and Dodge County, as we look at trying to support that GDP going down. And then the third function is obviously the federal enhancement to unemployment, the additional $600 a week that will continue through July. The tough piece is what happens then, and I think everybody is worried about, what is our economy going to look like then? What's going to happen next? What help do we think we may get from the federal government moving forward? Nobody really knows those kinds of things. I would tell you I've had some really interesting conversations. I'll share just a couple of them. One was with my old boss, who was the president of Enterprise Minnesota, the manufacturing extension partnership in Minnesota. And I said, how are you reacting to this, given the fact that you're not able to get into, most of their work is done face-to-face on the manufacturing floor. He said, well, we had a number of peer councils already in place, but we actually built a number of them again, or a number of additional ones, just to pull people in to share best practices that they're having. So that peer learning. So what are you doing within your business that has worked, or how are you viewing this particular program or that program? And he said that peer learning has been much more beneficial to our clients than having somebody kind of stand there at a webinar and say, here's what you need to do. Second conversation I had was with one of our faculty members here who has owned and operated a number of businesses. He wrote a startup guide about 2 years ago. He is going into print relatively shortly about kind of thriving through chaos. And as we were talking our way through that, he said, listen, you got three choices. You dive, you survive, or you thrive. And we are gathering some great success stories out there. I think we're all in kind of survival mode at this point in time. But we're seeing some companies that have been hugely innovative and are thriving. And it really starts in getting close to that customer. We always start with a question, why do your customers love you? And if you can get to those kinds of areas, you can find some pretty neat ways of innovating. One of the restaurants where I live, rather than opening up their full menu and saying, here's everything, they decided to go with a very high-end kind of specialty menu. So kind of chef's choice. And they limit it to 50 meals, and it goes out on Facebook, and you order that day by 2 o'clock, and many is the time that by 1 o'clock they're already sold out. And so it helps them in ordering, it helps them be able to react quickly, and you stop and pull up and pick up your dinner to go at a given time. They'll give you time when you stop and pick up. We've got also in my small town, we've got a coffee van, and you call ahead and there's a table outside, and they bring it out, and you're socially distanced the entire way. Retail is, as Vicki said, just going to be tough. And you've got to, as she mentioned, the concierge piece, that how well you know your customers and how well and how close you can get to them and serve their needs will be a determinant on how well you continue to thrive, kind of moving down the pike. I don't know what normal is going to look like after this. I can tell you it will be different. I think it will speed up some of the trends that have been happening already in terms of retail. But one of our mantras is get rich in your niche, and stay close and very close to your customer. The better you know them and what they're looking for, and why they love you, and if they're not there, why they don't love you anymore. Find that out and see if there isn't a way that you can serve them. With that, I'm going to turn it back over for questions.
Well, it's more a comment than a question, but I'm going to read it, and then you guys can kind of maybe speak to it, and maybe it's a good one that might start a discussion. The comment is, glad to hear the word resiliency. Let's consider what is essential for the long-term health of the county, personal, economic, and environmental. Coming out of this economic downturn without exacerbating the climate crisis that is also overwhelming is the win-win. We can take lessons of remote work to decrease energy inputs into running the economy. Building on the improvements to the environment should not be lost in the messaging.
Well, I'm going to hop in on that. I'm sure many of you have seen the aerial photos. I get the Wall Street Journal every day, and a variety of other sources, where they've been showing a variety of cities around the planet and taking a look at it, from the aerial view of what is the change in air pollution, what is the change on our sea levels in terms of the pollution as this pandemic has shut down essentially the world. And so I believe that whoever the comment came from is referencing that as a part of, is there a silver lining in this anywhere? I do think, 2 years out from now, we will be looking back at this time frame at the lessons that we learned, and how we are going to be changing our business models going forward based on the lessons learned. But I don't want to lose sight of that. I think it's so important because I've talked to, and I know Kevin and I talk about this as we've talked to different businesses who've reached out to us. There is a group of folks who believe that, a switch is going to be flipped and the economy is going to go right back to where it was pre-pandemic. If I frankly don't think that's going to happen. But, it's a happy thought, but I frankly don't think that's going to happen. I do think there will be that sense of relief for many, but I also think that we will have learned some very important lessons, and I just can't stress enough what we're learning and how that's going to affect, I see Mark's on this call. I'm sure that there are other school folks represented from around the county. But, we've known that people can learn without going to a campus, going to a building. What's it going to take for people to continue to learn, for us to educate folks at all levels? Well, obviously, they need to be connected. They're going to have access. They're going to have broadband. And those investments may need to be made. But at the end of the day, we will have learned that many people can also do their jobs without going to a building. And so how does that change the way we do business? How does that change the way we plan to do business going into the future? Ordering, again, that whole automation piece, recognizing that you can just put those screens into the restaurants and people can order their own food as opposed to having somebody standing there taking your order. But remember, when you replace that somebody standing there taking your order, you've created more jobs for the people who build that automation, build that software, who build that hardware, and who manage that. And so that's a different job. It's a very different job. So I think, you know, we're going to get 2 years out from this, and we're going to really start looking back long and hard. How's that going to affect everything we do going forward? I wish I had that crystal ball. And I would love to throw that out to the business people on the phone. I mean, what are your thoughts about what have you learned, and what are you thinking about going forward with your business? How might you change the way you do business going forward?
Vicki, do you want, if people want to chime in, should we just open it up to have people unmute themselves and make this more of a conversation?
I would love to.
Okay. So if anyone, wants to chime in,
I'll jump in right away. Hi, Vicki. My name is Leanne. I was already kind of trying to do a lot of contracting with people who were doing web type jobs, and only really needing a couple of people on the ground to do physical jobs. When I started my business, like that was already kind of the framework, that people could have that flexibility and be able to do their family things and then set a priority for their job and not be tied to their job as much as I think a lot of brick and mortar does. Not that I don't support brick and mortar businesses, because I absolutely do, but it always has a much higher cost in the beginning and maintaining through. Overhead is something that I have throughout my sales history, learned is a detriment. So I think if there's a way for us to figure out, yes, how to do kind of more of that concierge work, really just be appropriate agents to filter the needs of the public and the merchandise and things like that. I think that would be great. I do still appreciate being able to go into a store, but the stores that have been shutting down even at the box store level are stores that I kind of feel are almost like a window shopping experience. I go in there, I don't necessarily get the thing that I need because I'm kind of pricing things out and then getting it cheaper online. And I don't think I'm the only person who's doing that. And I mean that not disrespectful at all, but I think because there's so much high competition online and prices and export import kind of differences that happen with materials and goods and services, it is important for us to figure out what our service is exactly, what we're giving to each other as humans, and then figuring out, how to automate that. Because when I've talked to some other people that are still dealing with certain direct retails during this situation, what has been reflected on me is how they are nervous about automation, but they understand its necessity, but they also feel like it dehumanizes us. So I kind of wanted to bring that up to the group and see, like, if anybody reflectively has thought that way, about how when we take the human out of that operation, right? When I don't have somebody physically taking my order and I'm punching it into a screen, yes, that makes it a lower cost and higher efficiency for the company, but does that break down our human interaction? So I think that we've all gotten into a situation now here, being, within our safe at home environment, where we are craving human interaction. So one of the other things that I'm hoping will happen when we reopen is that people will be more mindful about how we interact with each other, just as kind of a general rule. But yeah, within business, I think it's more about figuring out exactly, like Kevin had said, where your niche is, and then just kind of follow that track. I also know that quite a few people who didn't have an online presence have been struggling. So I've been trying to coach some people with that issue as well, trying to help them through that process. And it can be a process, sometimes a cost issue, but also sometimes just a training issue, because people might not be savvy to be able to handle those kind of things. So anything that you guys can have, help to orient that in a more focused kind of way for finding, I don't know how you guys would do that, but and I assume you have a program that's kind of give some kind of training for how to get online or how to address that situation? If you don't, maybe that's something to put
No,
on your
our Madison, thank you, Amanda. Our
Yeah.
Madison office very quickly, and they've got a bigger staff, bigger office, but very quickly put together a kind of a SWAT team as to how to get online quickly, and are running some seminars around that. So if anybody is interested in that, I'd be more than happy to forward that information on. The classes are done virtually, but out of our Madison SBDC office, and would be available for anybody that has an interest in that.
Yeah, and Amanda, I would circle back and say to you that I've certainly seen many of our chambers from time to time run those types of education programs for people. We don't necessarily run those education programs. Again, it's a bandwidth issue. I've got 2.5 FTE. What am I going to do across 2 counties? But working with your chambers, trying to get that type of messaging out to folks that this is available at the local level and we can
Absolutely.
help you. Yeah.
I will bring that up with Jen.
Who I think is on the call.
Chamber. Yes, she is. So good. We'll put that in our notes.
Yeah.
There's Jen.
There's Jen.
There she is. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm done. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Oh, thank you. No, thank you. Anyone else? I mean, I may pick on some folks that I know on the call, but for our businesses that are, I mean, let's face it, if you're a hairdresser or a nail tech or a massage therapist, I mean, it's really hard to give a virtual massage. What I have had conversations with my own hairdresser to say, are you kidding me? I'm sure people would sign up for you to do online classes to teach us how to style our hair so that our roots don't show. Right? I mean, help.
I'm not going to touch that one, Vicki.
No, you shouldn't. But the point is get way outside of your box. Think about what it is you do. Think about that niche and think about how you might be able to do that differently than the way you've done it in the past, because there may be an opportunity there for you. And what have you got to lose by trying, right? As long as you've got that digital footprint and you're capable of making the sales, collecting the dollars, that may be there for you. So I see our chat light popping up, Julie. Is there more to be said?
Yeah, something just popped up. See, we have, is the Jefferson County team working or speaking with the WEDC to share examples of how turning the dial for businesses should look like within statewide plans? It seems the key is promoting safety. How are businesses shifting their models to promote how they are offering their goods and services safely?
So in a word, yes. I speak to WEDC frequently, nights, weekends, and holidays. And again, WEDC doesn't necessarily have the authority to open businesses or actually close them either. They are an arm of state government that basically has been tasked with interpreting the governor's stay and determining what is essential and what isn't essential. And so we've had lots of conversations around that. But yes, in a word, yes, WEDC is very aware, whether we're talking at the community level or all the way up to the CEO and the COO, as to what our businesses are experiencing and the types of assistance that they're going to need going forward. But more so than that, the whole community focus that WEDC has, they have several different programs that help communities to re-envision their downtown areas, re-envision their central business districts, help get derelict buildings down because there's an opportunity to build something else there. So there are a variety of different programs that they run. We've been having some conversations around how our downtowns and specifically our central business districts might be affected going forward if indeed there is this massive loss of retail and a lot of empty space in your downtowns. What types of programming might WEDC be looking at rolling out going forward? And their fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th. So the timing right now is good for that, because as they're thinking about different programs, they can make that shift, and hopefully we'll see some new things roll out by midsummer that can help our communities as well as our individual businesses. Because I really do think we're going to have a tough time in some communities. I'm concerned about that.
Vicky, I here quickly too is, if you have thoughts in terms of what would be appropriate guidance to how to safely reopen, that would be helpful to you all, because I know it's a common question Vicky and her team have gotten. If you could get that message to us as we start looking at the interaction with WEDC and the potential for our more regional type of plan, I think that'd be appreciated, because many of the things are based on conversations that our team is having with businesses, but this is a prime opportunity to make sure, put it out to 100 people. Hey, if you have ideas of things that would be helpful of how that is and how we can help you, I think that'd also be important.
Yeah, very, very good. Thanks, Ben. Do we have any other questions, comments, anything else anyone wants to put up here?
Yeah. This is Marissa Weidenfeller. So I've been on your guys' website, and I was just wondering if there could be some resources maybe listed there for businesses on how to recognize maybe some emotional support systems that we could recommend to our employees. As we all know, this is a really stressful time for all of us, especially those that have emotional needs. And you know, I know there's like the 24/7 number that you can call or text, and I just think that might be helpful to have on the site for businesses and community members, just to have those resources easily accessible.
I think, I'll let Ben go first.
Well, one item I also want to promote, and maybe we can get this on the link to the website too, I know it's on other parts of our website, is the county invested in a program called My Strength. It's an online program that we utilize in various factions, whether it's human services, Dale, et cetera, but it's a really proven outcome-based, evidence-based program for mental health, emotional health, and they actually have a specific module related to COVID-19 to help talk through some of the emotional issues and stress issues and how to deal with it. It is free. So it is free to our businesses, it is free to our residents, their workers, and it's a simple login. We do not get the information related to who's on it, so it's all protected. It's an individual plan. So it's something we promote with our staff. It's something we're promoting with some of the first responder groups. It's free. And so that's always good, right, in these times. But we'll make sure that's linked as well, so you can have that as a resource. And it's as simple as quick logging on, and you can look at your iPhone, your iPad, or computer, and multiple other devices.
Yeah, and we'll just put that right on, because we've got a COVID-19 page on our site. So we'll just put that link on there. I mean, it's free, it's easy, and it's available to everyone. And you're absolutely right, Marissa. It's not one of the things that's top of mind for us as we're working with businesses, and yet we all know that people are struggling in a lot of different ways. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have this, well, here's something in chat. It looks like an article, so I don't know that we can discuss it. It just says 9 things local government needs to do right now in response to a pandemic. So, and it's a link to an article. I can certainly share that with folks offline.
And it's 9 things local government can do?
Yeah. It's from strongtowns.org.
Oh.
So,
don't know what it is, don't know what's in it, but it's probably all stuff that we're already doing. I don't know that, I'm just assuming. I mean, we're certainly not behind the 8 ball in this county in terms of the conversations that we've been having about, from a county government perspective, about things we need to be thinking about as we're thinking about not just the rest of calendar year 2020, but obviously planning into and budgeting for 2021. Just like every one of you who's running a business, we have to think about this differently and recognize that this is going to sting for a while. All right.
I did pull up the article if anybody was interested what these top 9 things are.
Oh, put it out there.
Yeah, so it says immediate response, and I think a lot of these things have already been done, at least within the local districts and stuff here in Jefferson. Get people fed, get people shelter, support the public health response, connect masks to economic recovery, provide people space, to be outdoors and whatnot. Go easy on enforcements, support adaptation for local businesses, collect data as necessary, preserve cash. Let's see here, delaying non-critical projects and non-critical hiring for the next 12 months with flexibility. Yeah, I don't think you guys aren't doing a lot of those things, so, but your best to tell me.
Ben?
I think we've hit in every single one of those. I mean, I know because we have bigger parks, it's been like one of our biggest priorities, making sure those have been open for the public too, as an example. Just because we knew from a stress and mental health standpoint, and we get the flexibility because they're big parks to do that. And I just talked to some of our parks folks; they've never been busier, which is great because we're introducing folks to a resource that maybe they didn't know about before, as a whole. I know our ARDC team has been really working with how do we do the feeding part and really trying to connect people, and our nonprofit groups have really been stepping up. And again, another shout out to the Watertown Health Foundation. They've developed programs to help our other nonprofits in terms of these times too, to help them be sustainable so they can support many of those functions too from that local basis as a whole. Yeah, we've done from a local standpoint in terms of how we manage the dollars. We've done a lot of those things. We have hiring freezes on for non-essential, quote unquote non-essential. We hate using that term right now, but reducing some of our capital purchases right now, and basically many of those things that have been put in that article.
Yeah, I'd agree. I wanted to give a shout out to Superintendent Rollison for how well the school has been, releasing food to the community and maintaining their vendors. So,
Yeah, it's a big impact to our food processors in the state of Wisconsin, as I'm sure you all know. Without the schools being open, and without a lot of our larger businesses being open, who were buying a lot of this food in bulk, right? The trickle-down effect to the average food processor is becoming evident. A very good friend of mine who runs economic development up in Green Bay, I'm sure you've all seen the articles of the meat processing plants that have been shut down due to the number of cases up there. This is probably a very good time to think long, hard, and well about how we can support our local businesses that sell food and provide food, but also our agribusiness, the foundation of our economies. Certainly in the state of Wisconsin, I mean, we're a huge manufacturing state. I'm not downplaying that on any level, but the vast majority of what we manufacture is related to food. So making sure that we're supporting our agribusinesses as well. And I was thrilled to see, the window open up from SBA for agribusiness to be able to jump in and make applications this week. And lots of those folks as well have been signing up for the enhanced unemployment assistance, which is necessary, highly necessary. Now, as long as DNR doesn't give them a hard time for having to dump the milk that no one wants to buy, we should be fine.
We do have one comment that came up in chat. Let me pull that one up here. This one, it says, this will be a thank you comment. Being visible is a vital part of negotiating this as communities and counties. Thank you for being part of this and making it available for those not viewing live. So, thank you for that.
There you go.
If I could chime in just on a couple of things. First of all, Amanda, thank you for the compliment. We've served, I thought it was over 30,000 last week, and the numbers were off, but we're approaching $30,000 or 30,000 meals served already as of this week. So it's been far more than just families that would have originally qualified for free and reduced. There are a number of families who would have not have qualified, but have lost jobs and needed access. So most of this has been at drop-off sites at the high school and at Sullivan Elementary, but we've also had to do some door-to-door drop-off, a fair amount of that actually, and that'll continue. We feel quite confident that we'll be able to continue that throughout the entire summer, June, July, and August. However, if I understand the waiver that must be applied for through the USDA to allow for that to continue after June 30th, I don't think that it's a waiver that our school district has to apply for, because we've had a history of running a summer food program. But I think there's a lot of districts that will likely not qualify for that waiver after June 30th. And so more to come on that. But as of right now, I feel confident that we will not have to apply for it. And we just automatically will qualify for throughout the rest of the summer. Another just interesting, there's data that we're collecting throughout this entire time frame, and I heard Vicki say earlier, never waste a good catastrophe or a good difficult time. And although I don't wish this upon anybody, we certainly are learning an awful lot. And one of the things that has clearly been evident to us is that it only took about 4 or 5 weeks, and our K-12 kids, for the most part, have said, we want back. We just want back. That learning online, this is not the kind of thing that we want to do for the long haul. It might have been sweet for a few weeks, but we just want back. And we're seeing a significant drop off of focus from kids at home. And we've also learned that we're not designed as a virtual environment. There are virtual environments that are designed to be virtual environments. We're designed for brick and mortar. We're a relational institution. We communicate with people, engaging in whether it's, we used to do handshakes. I guess you can't do that anymore, but you can do a virtual high five in the hallway or even a smile in the classroom. And those go so far, particularly for kids that don't get that at home. And so we clearly have learned that this is not a replacement. We're doing our best to meet the needs of the curriculum that has been missed, but we're not coming close to meeting what we would intend to cover in a regular school year. So, and for those kids, those teenagers and youngsters that we think of as being in the technology age, they really want to put the screen time away. And the last little comment, humorous if I may, my granddaughter, who goes to East Elementary School here in Jefferson, stopped at our house the other night, knocked on my office window just to say hi to me through the window. And I opened the window up and she said, "Hey, look, we're talking through the screen again." And so here she is. She picked up on the fact that it's screen time, and so all right. Thank you again, Amanda. And just a few anecdotal comments.
Thanks,
that's
Mark.
Adorable. Yeah, and you're right, Mark. I'm next door neighbors with a family of 5 children. I would like nothing more than they should go back to school. I would be happy to help with that.
Yeah, they are extensively bored, and they keep coming around my house and asking to play, and I keep sending them back home. So
Yep.
You can't do anything else than that.
They're everywhere. But Mark, you brought up a really good point, and I think that's the critical piece for so many types of service providers is you've established a business model around a brick and mortar concept, and what if it isn't? Right? Or what if it changes in some way so that the brick and mortar needs change in some way? And I'm not saying they completely go away, but it's important for us to start having those conversations about what does that look like and how will that affect all types of businesses. All types.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's one thing for colleges, things at that academic level, to have gone to a very high frequency of virtual learning, which mostly, for instance, like MATC in Madison, has done a lot of virtual adaptation, but a lot of that too was because it was already a commuter college. It was already something that was very part-time, where people had to try to work and live and go to school. But at the elementary level, and even within the middle school and high school, that's just high school maybe, but elementary, they need that physical, they need that interaction, they need to be social, they need, so yeah, they are struggling. I have seen it, not just with my own child, but like with other kids too. Yeah, it's definitely is, and that's what I meant earlier when we were talking about whether or not you focus on, do you have to be a solid store? Why is that? Being able to just kind of justify yourself and say, like, because it's necessary for us to do our work this way, or figuring out if you can be a service provider in a different way. Moving forward. But absolutely, yes, he is definitely, you have your work cut out for you, Mark, and I hope that we all are back in the fall. So.
Yeah, and just to echo that social emotional piece, I work for the Fort School Districts, and there are quite a few students that have very supportive families at home, but we also have quite a few families in our communities that are not so supportive, and especially students who are facing trauma or grief. When they're in school, we're the eyes and ears, and we can recognize those signs, and them, if they don't have access to join virtually, and what if parents or family members don't answer phone calls when we try to check in on those kids? It's a really scary place to be in right now, and it's a pretty big hardship for all of us.
Yeah, I've been especially concerned about a couple of kids that I can't get a hold of, and I don't want to be that type of person that kind of creeps by their house in my truck and it's like, anybody in there, but I am concerned because some of those kids were at risk before this came, to fruition, and we can't get access to them now. So yeah, that's something that we do need to kind of discuss from a mental health perspective as well.
Vicki, what role do we collectively, all of us, play in shaping or providing input into how we begin to reopen?
Well, I think that's a great point. And Kevin, I know you and I have had many of these conversations, been having those conversations with the chamber directors, and, Ben threw it out earlier, and I couldn't agree more. Get to us. Y'all know how to reach me, right? Victoria P. at thriveed.org. You've got our website, you know how to find us. If you've got thoughts, if you've got ideas about the way for Jefferson County to reopen, or maybe a multi-county approach, things that are important to you, to your type of business, talk to us about that, because we've been drafting documents. It doesn't mean they're going anywhere. These are just thinking pieces, right? So we've been drafting documents and having conversations with law enforcement and public health and healthcare providers as to what's the best way to do this. Would love your input on that. Also, of course, have been talking to all of our chamber directors as they talk to their members. Would love your input and your ideas. We've seen plans come out of different areas in the state. One of them that I was pretty surprised by and impressed by came from, I forget how many, is it 9 counties, Ben, from western and northern Wisconsin.
Marathon County area.
Yeah, Marathon, but also, yeah, they were just scattered, really. I mean, Pierce, Marathon, all over the place. But what's important is we have to recognize that we physically sit between the 2 largest cities in the state, and those municipalities obviously have the largest number of cases. And we know we've got that I-94 corridor, and we understand that people go in both directions every day, from Dodge County, from Jefferson County, from Walworth County, from Rock County, right? But we are that land in between. And so our thinking about how our businesses reopen is probably going to be a little bit different from Marathon County, as it should be, because we're in a different space physically. But we also need to be having that conversation and promoting it and getting ready to do it. That's the single most important piece, is getting ready to do it. And part of getting ready to do it is making sure that all of our businesses are understanding what they're going to need to get back to fully open, right? Is there a need for PPE, or do you just want people to pull a bandana over their face, or not? Are you feeling like you're going to need to take people's temperatures to walk in? Are we going to get some clear guidance from anybody that tells us, yes, you must take everyone's temperature as they walk in the door for, I don't know, 30 days or whatever? Are you equipped to do that? Do you have the resources that you need to get that done? Because we want to make sure that when that stay is lifted, that our businesses have what they need in order for those doors to open. So that's a lot of the conversations we're having now. So send me your thoughts, send me your ideas. I'm happy to look at them, and we will continue to work on how we're going to make that happen.
We have another comment, and this might be, or a question that might be one for Ben. First, it starts with a thank you. Great idea to have a conversation about the state of the county, but then goes on to suggest that we could have additional meetings like this, and maybe have other department heads host and let us know what their challenges are and gains from this situation.
I guess a couple things that of interest. We have close to 25 departments in the county, so that could take some time. But I guess internally what we're doing, and I know there's area of focus, and one of the concerns that have been brought before is the agriculture communities and how we're responding. And really we're focusing a lot with our land and water team on that. I think Laverne's on here. He's our ag educator for UW Extension. I know he's been engaged in some of the processes related to how to help the farmers and some of the things. I think most folks on this call understand and know that pre-COVID, agriculture economics was tough. And as Vicki alluded to, with some of the requirements for you in the dairy in terms of something it's made it even tougher. This past week, I know some of the programs were specifically set up just for agriculture to apply, just to try to help them out quite a bit with some of those federal programs that Kevin talked through. So, and perhaps maybe that's something we need to look at as we look ahead, as we're getting our committees back in line, and some user groups with the focus on some of those areas. What we are doing from a county standpoint, we've developed a process called priority-based budgeting, where we have taken our whole budget, put into a software package to really kind of score it and functionalize how we operate. And going back to the question of lessons learned, we're using that tool to help us as we look ahead to the future. We overnight, same as many of the businesses, we put over 200 people on telecommuting ourselves, and that's something we're learning. Does that make sense as we look long term from our personal standpoint? Is that a new way for business too, for local government in our viewpoint? And we've had some good lessons learned, positive, negatives, like many others probably, but more positive negatives. We set up telehealth in terms of human services overnight too. And so I think good comment. I think there's a lot that we're all learning through this process of how we can reimagine. But I think the other positive, I think, just to kind of reemphasize, is we had some great partnerships before COVID. Public, private, nonprofit, local government, et cetera. And I'll be honest, I think we're seeing the fruits of those relationships, and they're getting even stronger. And so as we look to the future of how we recover post-COVID, I think there's a lot of great things we're going to build on together. And so I guess if you want to say using it as a crisis, I think part of it is there were seeds planted before this, but those seeds have sprouted as we look for the betterment of the whole. And I think that's one of the great things of this, if you want to look at it from that standpoint, and working together. Pre-COVID, would we get 100 people on a call like this? I'll be honest, I don't know. But we have folks on here from various local governments. We have nonprofits on here, lending institutions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's pretty exciting as we can look at the future of the counties and our communities as a whole. So I'll leave it at that.
So as we wrap this up, I just want to give a shout out and say a big thank you to Ben for everything that he's done in his leadership. For those of you who may not be aware, I've been doing this work for a very long time, multiple decades in 5 states, and I've worked in government in the past and have not always had the best time. And working as part of this team with the Jefferson County group has just been an awesome experience in an unprecedented time. So I want to thank him for his leadership and for being on this call. And also to my friend Kevin, because together we could rule the world, but we're not going to. Together we could just really do a lot to help our businesses, and the partnership that we have had, I think, has just grown stronger as a result of this, and hopefully it's going to just benefit more of our businesses across the 2 counties, and we'll be able to work more effectively with our municipal leaders as well to ensure that we're doing the right things to instill that environment that makes it possible for businesses to keep investing in our communities. And I guess if I'm going to leave you with one thought, it's this. If you're running a business and you haven't reached out to let your state elected officials know what's on your mind at this time, you might want to do that kind of outreach and let them know your thoughts about how this is affecting your business, your thoughts about how this is affecting your community, your thoughts about things that they might be able to do at the state level to help us all get through this and come out the other end stronger. So I will just say thank you to everyone. Thank you, Julie, so much for setting this up and for being the moderator. And you know where to reach me. Send me emails, call me.
Thank you, Vicki.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks,
Is there another one of these scheduled anytime soon? Do we have a date, or should we just wait for an email?
Well, there's one starting for Dodge County in about 45 minutes, and then no, we haven't set up the next one yet.
Yeah, we'll keep you posted if there's another Jefferson County one, but you're welcome to attend the Dodge County one too.
Yeah, because the other thing too that I when Kevin asked the question about is there a start back up plan for our area and what that might look like, and I don't want to steal too much, speaking of screen time here with everybody right now, and I don't even have answers to this yet, but what will phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 look like from a public school perspective? And not to make this all about public schools, but the vast majority of the businesses out there have employees with children in our school, and if they can't get to work because their kids aren't in school, that impacts every single one of you. And I don't have answers to that yet. We're waiting to find out what does that look like. If they move to phase 1 and that means 10 people or less, does that mean a bus driver and 9 kids? Does that mean only 10 people in the lunchroom at a time? Does that mean only 10, and it moves to 50 to phase 2, same thing. Are we allowed to have lunches with only 2 cooks and 48 students? What does that look like? And again, a significant impact on the overall fiscal picture, the economic picture of our agencies and our businesses in the county. And I think that if we do host another one of these meetings, whether that's in 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now, I might have a little more of a clear picture that myself and the other superintendents in the area could share with people, because that again impacts all of you, I believe. So
It does, Mark.
Yep.
That would be great.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, no, we've had the conversation about doing these every couple of weeks. We just, haven't scheduled it yet, but I'd love to. And thank you for that comment, because you're absolutely right. There's been some conversation as well about, will there be a program out of WEDC to help fund daycare and help fund that type of support, right? Because you're right.
Yeah, we mandate masks and PPE. Who's going to provide them, and how do you,
Right.
I've heard the stories of people walking into, I think, a large retailer, and masks are required, and if you don't have one, it's $1, and you buy one on site.
Not a story. It's happening right in Johnson Creek. Yeah.
Yeah, one more thing I would add. So many of these decisions are over all of our heads, over all of our pay grades. So I think the best thing we can do is just communicate with each other. What is the liability? What should I do? What am I going to do? Most of the things that were brought up today is really going to depend on the Supreme Court. I mean, that's a huge decision, because if that happens, plan on May 12th. But what's then our liability, and how do we relate that locally? would be helpful.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what we're waiting for too, Jim, is just kind of what does that case law actually look like so we can respond. In many cases, if you look at the main question before the court, it's really is should it go through a rulemaking process. So I know a couple folks have asked me, does this mean we open up automatically? And that's really not what the case says either. The legislator's brief actually says there should be a 6-day stay upon the ruling, just because I think there's a known commodity that you just can't lift, quote unquote, lift a light switch, because that's not going to be responsible either. So more to follow, obviously.
Right. Yeah, just put it in layman's terms so I can understand it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
All
you.
right. Have a good evening. Take
Have a
care.
good day.
See
Bye-bye.
you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.